A few hours later, Jack finally arrived in Inchoate City. He looked at the serene environment of the Prince and Princess Palace and couldn't help but feel nostalgic. Being far from the busy streets and roads, the environment here was relaxing. He could stay here without having to worry about the noise or meeting with a situation like the one that he'd when he met with Garpy. As the Eurocopter landed on the roof of the garage, Jack looked at Gabriel and said, "Next week, we will be heading to the Central Province. But of course, we won't be using the Eurocopter." Gabriel was surprised when he heard this. He looked at Jack with no words to say as he wondered just how rich Jack really was. Although he himself was hired at a price of over 1 billion, that was for a whole year. One had to remember that the 1 billion wasn't his income, but it included the insurance of the plane that he would be flying, added together with the price of fuel for the plane. On the other hand, Jack had bought the Eurocopter that was worth at least $150 million. Although it couldn't be said to be much, as compared to the price that Jack had paid to have him as his pilot, it was high when spent on a plane. "We'll be using the plane at an airport?" Gabriel asked after a moment. "You can say something like that. But we will get to Venture City with the Eurocopter. I have a private business jet in the Venture Abroad Airport that has a branch in the Venture City," Jack replied as he removed the headsets. Now that the Eurocopter was no longer making so much noise, they could communicate freely without using the headset. "A private jet? It has been a while since I flew such a plane," Gabriel muttered with a smile. He had been flying helicopters the most as they were the ones that were mostly used by those that paid for 1 day or 2 days trip. As for those that had their own private jets, why would they go through the issue of hiring a temporary pilot? They had their own professional pilots. Although Jack had stated that they were going to use the private jet, Gabriel didn't think much of it. After all, how big could a private jet that Jack owned be? After getting out of the garage, Jack met with the guards. They had heard when the Eurocopter came in. So, some of the guards came to welcome Jack back. "How have things been here when I was away?" Jack asked. "There were no problems at all. It's just that there were a few people who came here to ask for you." The leader of the guards, whose name was Bob, replied. Jack frowned a little when he heard that there was someone that came here looking for him. According to what he knew, there shouldn't be anyone that was supposed to come looking for him here. Sabrina, who was in charge of Homescope Properties Limited, wasn't someone that was related to Jack for her to come looking for him. As for George, the guards knew him all too well for them not to mention his name if he came looking for him. And apart from those two, Evans from the Bentley shop knew here. But the guards knew him. If either of the three found out that he wasn't there, they would simply call him as they both had his contact number. "Do you know any of those that came looking for me?" Jack asked after thinking for a while. None of them ever mentioned who they were. There were 4 of them, and neither of them had the intention of revealing their identity, claiming that you're the only one that was qualified to know them. Bob replied. He too had found that there had to be something fishy going on. As a result, he had made sure that the security was increased. He could somehow relate this to Dalton as he was the only one that had the intention of looking for Jack. If Bob could, then Jack could also relate this incident to Dalton. Narrowing his eyes, he looked at Bob and said, "Don't allow anyone in here without confirming with me. That's unless the person is one of those that have been here before." "Yes, boss." Bob nodded before leaving with the other 3 guards that he'd come with. Jack, on the other hand, welcomed Gabriel into the Prince Mansion. And for the first time since he came here, Gabriel appreciated the scenery. He had to accept that it was true that this place was good for retreat after working hard for years. But it was just that it was located in the city. If it was on a hill somewhere, it would have been good. And it would have been better if there were a few birds that made the atmosphere even more lively in the forest around the mansion. After Gabriel sat, Jack prepared a meal for him. Although he wasn't the best cook, his food was still good as he had been cooking for himself ever since his mother passed away if he didn't eat outside. Jack asked Gabriel to select a room for himself. The top floor only had his master bedroom, the swimming pool, and a few other things that could make him relax well. So, the room that Gabriel chose was on a lower floor. "You can leave this place and go around the city. I'll call you if there's a need for that. There's a basement where you can entertain yourself. And one more thing, if you're going out, you can just pick one of the cars out there. The keys are there," Jack said as he pointed at a small table that was close to the door. There were several keys there. So, All that Gabriel had to do was to pick one of the keys, go out and press it. The one that will respond would be the one that he would use. Gabriel wasn't polite at all as he accepted Jack's arrangement. He was now Jack's subordinate till a year ended from now. In other words, till next summer, he would be working for Jack. The following day, Jack looked at the group of 20 in front of him. Currently, they were wearing the special uniforms that safety enforcers provided for those that were in the private teams. "You know what to do, right?" Jack asked. "Yes, boss." They both replied at the same time. "Okay then, let's get going," Jack stated as he got into his Bentley Continental GT. The others took other 5 Bentley Bentegas and drove behind Jack. On the way, Jack took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, Jack." Celine's voice reached his ears. For some reason, he let out a sigh of relief when he heard her. He smiled as he asked, "How have you been? Any problems till now?" Although he had asked Heyman to help him on taking care of Celine, he still had to confirm with her. "Yes, thanks for your help. Although the gangsters are still present, they have maintained their distance and don't dare to approach." Celine replied. Jack was finally relieved. He smiled and said, "No need to worry about them. I'm in the city now, so you can count on me to deal with them." "You're already back? How come you didn't tell me?" Celine asked in surprise. "Well, I told you that I would be back by the end of the week," Jack stated. "But today is the first day of the week," Celine said. "I came back yesterday." Jack's smile expanded as he said this. "Well, I guess you really fulfill your promises. But you can at least tell me so that I can wish you a safe trip?" Celine continued. "I will make sure to tell you next time then," Jack reassured. "Okay then, I'm starting with some of those members of the gang that are causing trouble for my stores before reaching your place," Jack stated. "Be careful." And after that, the conversation between the two of them ended. Jackson Enterprise Grocery Department, Yellow Street. The grocery store here looked absolutely different from the dirty buildings that surrounded it. The front and the sides of the store were well cleaned, maintaining the high hygiene that was required for those that dealt with consumables. Currently, instead of the usual busy scene where customers entered and exited the store, the area around the store was completely isolated, with only a few people in green uniforms standing in front of the store, looking helpless. These were the staff members that had been hired by Agnes. They had been working well in this place, but things suddenly became bad when the gangsters began causing trouble for them. They had threatened and chased away any customer that dared to come to the store to buy any groceries. As a well-known gang in Yellow Street, the Jerks Brothers gang had a bad reputation and was feared by most of the residents here. So, the moment that they stated that nobody was allowed to buy anything in the grocery store, nobody dared to come forward. And to make sure that nobody disobeyed them, they stationed a few of their gangsters here to keep watch. At this time, George came to this store. He was in charge of delivery, and as a result, he wasn't someone that stayed in a single place. As he drove the Bentley Bentayga SUV to the parking lot of the store, he shook his head as he looked at the desolate situation of the store. Although he knew who was behind this and could have dealt with it, it was just that the period that he had made a bet with Ismail hadn't ended. As a result, he couldn't use his family influence to suppress them. Just as he got out of the car, he saw a few men with tattoos walking towards him with steel rods, pipes, and baseball bats. There was no need for him to ask what they were doing here as he knew that they were the ones that were causing trouble here. "Kid, are you the one that's in charge of the store?" One of the men with a bald head stepped forward as he asked. "What's wrong with that? You better stop causing trouble here, or it won't end well with you." George looked at him gloomily as he stated. The bald head didn't think much of George's threat. He knocked the car with his steel rod as he said, "Jackson Enterprise, huh? Not a good name. I can tell that this person is new in Inchoate City. So, it's obvious that he doesn't have much influence here." He ignored George's angry gaze as he continued, "So, I would like to give you a good advice. You better close this store of yours. Otherwise, you're going to suffer bigger losses once everything inside the store expires or they are no longer fresh. In any case, we're not leaving this place before this store closes down." George wanted to reply, but it seemed that he didn't need to do that. He saw the familiar Bentley Continental GT heading his way and smiled. "You think so? I will advise you to leave in the next 5 seconds, or you'll end up in deep hot soup." "You think so?" I will advise you to leave in the next 5 seconds, or you'll end up in deep hot soup. Bald Head didn't understand why George would say that they would be in deep hot soup. They were members of a gang that was well known in the city. They had spread their roots to almost each part of the city, Yellow Street being amongst them. According to what they knew, in this mission, they were supported by a certain big family. As for which one it was, they weren't sure, as only those in the upper echelons of the gang knew. Even so, he wondered what had given George, who was almost helpless not long ago, the courage to say those words with a smile. Was he trying to bluff his way out of the situation by boasting a big background? The more that Bald Head and the others that had come with him thought about it, they thought that it was true that George might be trying to threaten them. Bald Head scoffed at George as he said with a contemptuous smile, "Heh, I would like to see what kind of hot soup you're talking about. You think that you can frighten us by using such tricks? We're members of the Jerks Brothers gang, and there are only a few things that can make us retreat." George's smile broadened as he said, "Then I guess that is going to make you retreat, right?" As he said these words, he pointed at the Bentley that was arriving. Bald Head and the others turned around and looked at the Bentley that was coming their way. From the way that it was, they could already tell that it was worth at least $1 million. But even so what if that person had a car that was worth $1 million? In their eyes, this was nothing as compared to the one that had given them the mission. Just a single person cannot dash. His words were forced to stop as just behind the Bentley Continental GT, 5 Bentley Bentayga SUVs followed. And from their appearance and paint, they could see that they looked just like the one that George was driving. Even idiots could tell at a glance that the cars that were coming were from the same group as George's. They knew that there were several other stores like this one in the city. As such, they had spread their men all over, trying to make sure that the business was not running as much as possible. As they watched in surprise, Jack's Bentley came and stopped next to George's Bentayga. As for the other 5 Bentaygas, they blocked the exit. And immediately after that, 20 people hurriedly got out of the cars with batons in their hands. Here, there were only a group of 9 gangsters. So, when facing the 20 that had surrounded them, they immediately became flustered as their previous smug smiles completely disappeared. All that was left was panic in their eyes. The door of the Continental GT opened, and Jack, who was wearing casual clothes, alighted. Even though his clothes were casual, they just couldn't hide his amazing physique as well as his charm. George strode forward and greeted as he patted Jack's shoulder. "Boss, you're finally here. I was wondering when you were going to arrive. If you had been late, these idiots would have caused us losses." Jack smiled and returned to George's greeting. He himself was already angry with this group that was causing trouble here. The previous night, he had only received $9 million, and this was after the multiplier was applied. Grace had already informed him during the day, and he decided to deal with this on this day, as he had told the group that he'd come with from Venture City that the mission would be carried out on this day. The previous day was Saturday, a day that business was supposed to bloom. But the business was so bad in that he made losses of hundreds of millions. So, he had to deal with this as soon as possible. He looked at Bald Head and strode towards him. Upon seeing Jack approaching, the Bald Head that had just lost his voice immediately began talking. "You better not make things difficult for us, or our boss won't let you go." "I think that you're mistaken. I don't plan on letting any of you go. You've caused me losses worth hundreds of millions by blocking my business," Jack stated coldly as he continued approaching Bald Head. Jack's words made the crowd flabbergasted. Hundreds of millions? From grocery stores? Can you stop exaggerating too much? Of course, they didn't know that Jack could earn up to 200 million or more on such a day as long as the multiplier effect was applied. But the previous day, he only made 9 million instead. That's a loss of over $100 million. In any case, he wasn't going to talk about the system to anyone. But they at least had to know that they had caused him great losses and they had to pay for that. "You won't let us off? Do you know who our boss is?" The Bald Head threatened. "I don't know him, but I would like to know him." "And do you know me?" Jack asked as a cold smile formed on his lips. Bald Head was obviously not expecting that Jack wouldn't get frightened by his threat. What's more, he was right. They too didn't know Jack, and neither did they know his abilities. But in any case, he was just a newcomer to the city. A dragon cannot beat a snake in its own home ground, right? Thinking about this, Baldhead pointed his steel rod at Jack and said, "It doesn't matter who you're. But at the end of the day, what I'm sure is that you are going to get into bigger trouble than this as long as you make a move on us." "I would like to see that trouble," Jack said before waving his hand. "Beat them up until they can't walk. Just make sure not to break their bones." With Jack's order, the 20 members of PST made their move. They were all trained, even if it was only for a short period of time. So, their movements were swift and decisive. On the other hand, other than being at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, the gangsters were just a group of people who suppressed the weak while fearing the strong. They mainly depended on their numbers to suppress others and not their skills. So, they were beaten up in no time. With the electric current of the batons, they were immobilized after a few minutes of beating. Those that were observing were both amazed and excited upon seeing this scene. Nobody loved these bullies as they had made their lives hard in the streets. So, they would be happy when they saw that someone was going against them. The cries of the gangsters as they were beaten up were like music to the ears of the bystanders. After seeing that they had been beaten well, Jack took a step forward as he motioned for the 20 to stop. He squatted and looked at Baldhead with an amusing expression on his face. "You've been beaten up, but I can't see the trouble that you mentioned," Jack said. Baldhead wailed on the ground. Although their bones were not broken, who said that their limbs couldn't be dislocated? So, the pain that they were going through at this moment was intense. Jack shook his head and searched Baldhead's pocket and took out a phone. Surprisingly, it wasn't a smartphone. It was a buttons phone. He shook his head and scrolled through the contact list present in the phone, and not long after, he found a contact that said that this guy was a gangster. It was saved as Big Brother 3. With the gang being called the Jerks Brothers Gang, Jack could already tell that there might be several brothers amongst the top gangsters of the gang. He made a call, ignoring the cries and shouts of Baldhead. "What's wrong, Baldy? Have they closed the store already?" A thick and deep voice came through. "What closing of stores? I have something to discuss with you. I don't know if you have the guts to let me know where you are now." Jack sneered as he asked. There was silence for a moment before Brother 3 spoke. "You're the owner of the stores? Seems like I'm talking with someone that has some brains after all." Jack replied. "Humph, maybe you don't know your place. Opening a few stores made you so smug? I'm at the old warehouse that belonged to Dizza. If you have the guts, you can come here. It will be good if we can directly deal with you and stop wasting much time blocking the store's entrances." Brother 3 said. Jack smiled and said, "Not a problem at all. I'll be there on around 30 minutes. It will be good if you bring all of your brothers there. After all, it's good to deal with all of you in a single swoop." After that, Jack ended the call. He looked at George and said, "You can take care of things here in the other stores with their help. I'll be back in a while." Without giving George a chance to reply, Jack got into the Bentley Continental GT and drove towards the west outskirts of the city. Dizza was an old factory that used to manufacture plastics. But, since it was located closer to the city, they were forced to move to another side due to the pollution that they were causing. Now, it seemed that the Jerks Brothers gang had taken over that warehouse of theirs as their new base. From the location and a few other factors, it was indeed a good place for them to hide from the public. Jack wasted no time as he drove faster. He knew that the more time that he wasted, the higher the losses that he was going to suffer. Well, although it couldn't be considered as real losses, less profit was lost to him now. He had to accumulate a wealth of $500 billion. This was just the amount of money that he was supposed to have in hand, not to mention the 5 companies with net worth of at least $500 billion. Now, as long as he could get money, Jack wouldn't dare be careless to let the chance slip away. About 20 minutes later, he arrived at the old warehouse. The area around the warehouse was almost empty, and only a few people were passing by this area. Many people didn't like this part of the city due to the pollution that had occurred here about 5 years ago. All the same, Jack didn't care and drove the Bentley towards the gate. The factory of this warehouse itself was located not far from this location, but still, it was about 3 kilometers from here. The moment that Jack's Bentley arrived, a group of people got out of the warehouse. There were more than 100 of them, and each one of them had a weapon of their own liking in their hands. They gazed towards the approaching Bentley Continental GT excitedly. They were looking forward to beating up someone. Jack stopped not far from them before he alighted from the Bentley. Although there were more than 100 men in front of him, Jack wasn't afraid in the least. He stood in front of them without showing any fear. "Where's your boss? Tell him to get out of here. Or is he afraid of me even before we meet?" Jack stated as he looked at the group in front of him. "Kid, who are you to ask to see our boss? Do you know where you are? This is the territory of the Jerks Brothers gang. Nobody makes a scene here. Maybe he's just a newborn calf that isn't afraid of the tiger. King idiot. Just you wait till I smash this bat on your head." The crowd of gangsters immediately began throwing curses and taunts towards Jack. Jack had no intention of bantering with them. "So, better stop talking nonsense if you're not the leader here. If your leader is a coward and that he can continue hiding even after I came here, then I can only go inside and pull him out by myself." Jack's words were arrogant in front of the muscular and armed group. But all the same, they had no chance of speaking as a person came from behind them at this moment. It was a man who seemed to be in his late 40s. He had a huge scar on his chin. Currently, several tattoos could be seen on his exposed parts of the body. But the most eye-catching was the tattoo of a knife that was on his left side of the neck. That knife was the one that was used by the military. And the one on him was one that had been drawn in such a way that it depicted the blood stains on it. Just from this tattoo, Jack could conclude that this guy was cold-blooded. Looking at Jack, who was standing straight in front of the over 100 men, the person that had come from behind the group smiled as he said, "You're brave for a youngster. I didn't expect that you would really show up alone." The voice was extremely familiar to Jack as he had heard it not long ago. He gazed at the man and said, "Do you know how much losses you've caused? That's over $100 million. Can you compensate me?" "Big Brother 3. Are you kidding me? Who's that in this city that can make over $100 million in a single day? Even the biggest family in Inchoate City, the Dante family, cannot do that." Big Brother 3 said contemptuously, "If you haven't seen that happen, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist." Jack wasn't ready to explain himself and went straight to the point. "Who was the one that sent you to cause trouble for my stores?" he asked, coldly this time. Big Brother 3 looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "Why should I tell you? It's not like you have the ability to make me tell you that, right?" In return, Jack smiled and said, "Okay then, let's see my ability." With that, he gazed at the crowd of gangsters and said, "Whoever beats up the so-called Big Brother 3 till he says who gave him the mission will receive $100,000 from me." Jack's words caused the crowd that was whispering to each other to immediately go silent. Each and every gang member gazed at Jack, wondering if he was joking or if he was serious about what he had just said. Seeing no response from the crowd, Jack raised 2 fingers in the air and spoke once again. "If you think that $100,000 is not enough, then I'll make it $200,000. Jack's words made the crowd swallow their saliva while thinking about the big amount of money. If they could get that amount of money, they could simply retire from being gangsters and live a better life that had no risks involved. When he saw Jack's plan, Big Brother 3's expression shifted, mostly the moment that he saw that the group seemed to be considering Jack's words. Controlling the gangsters wasn't something simple, as all those that joined the gang all had their own reasons. And if they could get a benefit, they wouldn't mind killing someone, let alone beating him up. So, he was forced to take command early and stop Jack from giving out more benefits. "What are you all thinking about? Get him and beat him up. Once he's down, the money that he's promising will be ours anyway," Big 3 said. /n. Instead of the long name, I'll just call him Big 3. When they were told another method of gaining even better benefits, the group no longer felt tempted by Jack's reward. So, they all swarmed towards him, ready to beat him up. Jack sneered when he saw this. So, it was true that Big 3 was someone with brains after all. So, the only means to convince these people would be to beat them up. When they saw that they had no other way out of this, they would have to compromise. What about $500,000? Jack tried again. If he could solve this without having to waste his time fighting with them, it would be better. Hee, your small rewards are not appreciated. We'll just beat you up so that you can hand over the money by yourself. They no longer listened to what Jack had to say as they charged towards him. Upon seeing that there was no way out of the situation, Jack could only roll the sleeves of his shirt to prepare himself for the fight. When the first person arrived in front of him, Jack gave him no time to attack and used the chance that they were underestimating him to deal a decisive blow. Thump! A single hit on the chest, and the guy was forced to fly backwards, knocking down those that were charging forward. Jack didn't stop at that as he swung his fists at those that came towards him. Since there was a crowd of over 100 men charging towards him, it was obvious that not all of them would attack him at the same time. So, as he moved around the crowd, he landed heavy punches on them. One punch that would make sure that the one that was punched wouldn't get back onto their feet. With everything of his being 4 times higher than the ones that were attacking him, Jack had no problem at all. He evaded what could be evaded and used other gangsters as shield when necessary. And so, it wasn't long before more than 20 gangsters lay on the floor wailing miserably. The others had no choice but to take a few steps backwards because none of them had expected that Jack was this fierce. Now that about a fifth of them were on the ground while Jack had no injuries on him, they lost the confidence that they were having before. Even Big 3 wasn't expecting such a scene. He had thought that it would be easy for them to kill Jack. With him dying in a place that was far from the public eye, there would be no one that would take them accountable considering that there were no witnesses. As if this was just a warm-up, Jack began stretching his joints. He had never been forced to use any aspect of his improved self to the maximum. But facing the more than 10 men at a single time, he had to use his speed and reaction at the maximum to avoid being hit. He looked at the goons that were eyeing him warily and smiled as he said, "Now, I don't want you to beat him up. Instead, all those that are going to join and work under me will receive a monthly salary of $30,000. Jack's words immediately changed the previously tense and somber atmosphere around the warehouse. "Now, I don't want you to beat him up. Instead, all those that are going to join and work under me will receive a monthly salary of $30,000. Jack's words immediately changed the previously tense and somber atmosphere around the warehouse. "If you're not convinced about that, you can still come and receive a beating from me. I'm not done warming up yet," Jack said as he revealed a smile that gave the gangsters a shiver. What he just said was true. He had just felt that his muscles had been stimulated, just like how people would feel like when they were doing exercises. And now, he could feel that he was far from getting tired. So, he didn't mind continuing for a little while to stretch his muscles to the limit. Although he claimed to be the limit, he was still holding back his punches. Otherwise, the group that had received his attack would have definitely been in a bad shape at this moment. At this moment, Big 3 knew that things weren't going the way that they were supposed to. He got alarmed. But he still tried maintaining the calm expression on his face. Don't get deceived by him. The moment that you agree to this, as long as he gets what he wants, how can he guarantee that he will pay you the amount of money that he's promised you? Big 3 said as he warily eyed Jack. There was a certain period of silence as the goons were contemplating on what to do. At this time, one of them took a step forward and said, "I agree to that. I'll join you." The others were stunned by this guy's decisiveness. They had never expected that he would agree to Jack's offer that easily. "That's good. From now on, you will be the leader of those that will agree to work under me. Your salary has been increased to $50,000 a month," Jack said as he nodded his head in satisfaction. He didn't view this guy as an easy person to sway, but a smart one. He could already tell from the current situation that they had no chance of winning at all. Jack, on the other hand, was offering a big and guaranteed salary. In other words, he was not a simple person like they had thought he was. Someone that could afford to pay millions a month as salary to a group of gangsters. How could that person be simple? Upon seeing the scene where one of them took a step forward, Big 3 was enraged. He pointed his finger at that guy and said, "You idiot, once I'm done with this guy, I'll make sure to break your limbs." The guy looked at him and said, "What's the difference? Here, I can have guaranteed monthly payment. On the other hand, I sometimes get nothing at the end of the month as there's nothing to do. And for both sides, no matter where I choose, I'll end up beaten if things don't go as I had expected." Big 3. His words were like a wake-up call to the others. If they didn't join Jack, they would end up beaten. On the other hand, if they joined Jack, they would still end up being beaten up as long as Jack lost in the fight. But now, it was just a matter of where they would benefit the most and where there were higher odds of winning. And at this moment, the high odds and benefits were all on Jack's side. So, one by one, The gangsters began joining Jack's side until there was only about a dozen of them standing together with Big Three, who was fuming at this moment. He looked at the dozen or so goons that were standing behind him and thought, only these are the loyal ones. If I manage to get out of here, I surely will treat them well. He had just finished thinking this way when suddenly, a heavy punch landed on his back. Not expecting to be attacked from the back, Big Three was forced to stagger forward. He turned around and gazed at the group that was looking at him with hungry eyes. He shouted, "What the F***CK do you think you're doing? Aren't you supposed to stand with me?" "I'm sorry, Big Three, but I don't remember saying that I'll stand with you in this. I simply stood here because I'm still trying to gain the $500,000 reward that was mentioned before." The guy with the red shirt spoke. The ones behind him had the same thoughts as him. So, they also nodded before charging towards Big Three, all at the same time. As for the ones that were standing behind Jack, they suddenly realized that they had just missed such a big opportunity. Although they wanted to make a move at this moment, they held themselves back as they didn't want to make Jack's impression on them to drop further. Although he was attacked by over 12 men at the same time, Big Three still managed to knock down 2 men. But at the end of it all, he was just a single person and was being attacked by a whole group. So, in the end, he was forced onto his knees with several injuries on him. "Boss, we've subdued him for you." The guy with the red shirt, the one that had initiated the attack, looked at Jack as he said these words. In return, Jack nodded in appreciation. Then, he said, "You've done a good work. And it seems that you're good at seizing opportunities. Had you done this earlier, I surely wouldn't have minded rewarding you with $1 million. The guy with the red shirt felt that he had just missed an even bigger opportunity. But still, he was still satisfied that he had gotten the small opportunity. "But you still have a chance. Just make him say who's the one that had given him the mission to disrupt the activities of my stores," Jack stated as he eyed Big Three, who was now on his knees, with his head lowered. Big Three wasn't stupid. He knew that the situation wasn't in his favor at this moment. He knew that even if he had managed to beat the over 12 men that had attacked him, there were still others that were eyeing him, waiting for a chance to strike at him. Although he was angry at this moment, he had to look for a way to get himself out of this situation first. Otherwise, there was no way that he was going to give the information about what had happened here to the leader of the gang. The guy with the red shirt immediately threw a punch towards Big Three's head. And Big Three, who had been expecting that they would ask him the question first before taking action when he didn't answer, was immediately forced to eat dirt. "Didn't you King hear what boss just asked? He said that you're supposed to tell him who gave you the stupid suicide mission," the guy in red shirt yelled. Jack could tell that this guy was kind of venting his anger on Big Three. Maybe Big Three had been suppressing him a lot in the past days. In any case, that didn't matter to him at the moment. Big Three used his hands to try and get his face from the ground. And feeling aggrieved, he asked, "Hey, aren't you supposed to ask questions first before using the other methods to make me talk if I refuse? I just felt like punching you again. Furthermore, have you gone deaf after receiving a beating? I think boss asked that question since the start," the guy replied as he twisted his fist in the air, as if he was ready to punch again. Big Three, he thought for a moment, and decided to give the answers before getting himself out of here. As for this Big Three and the others that had betrayed him, he decided to forget about that for the moment. The Jerks Brothers gang was big, and the over 100 men that he'd brought here weren't even half of the whole gang. So, as long as he left here, he could simply deal with these ingrates using the other gangsters. "All right, I'll talk," Big Three said before taking a deep breath. "To tell the truth, I myself don't know who was the one that sent the mission. Our leader was the one that talked with him over the phone, and he may be the only one that knows him. As for the background, I can assume that it may be a member of the 5 big families, or the Dante family." Jack listened and thought things through. He then asked, "Are you sure that it wasn't Frank?" Big Three was surprised that Jack knew about Frank. But all the same, he shook his head and said, "He hired us. But later, someone else called our boss to make a bigger move. As for Frank, he came looking for us and asked us of the same thing. I can only guess that this is the action of 2 different people." Jack's eyes narrowed. He decided that he would need to meet this leader of theirs so that he could know the other mastermind. All the same, it wasn't going to be hard to deal with Frank. He was now richer than the Dante family. So, He was sure that he could block all the sources of income or resources for their companies by breaking the partnerships that they had formed. But he wasn't ready to make a move on the whole Dante family in respect to George. It seemed that he would have to look for another way of punishing Frank without influencing the whole family. Okay then, take me to that leader of yours. I will deal with him and the one that had given him the mission, Jack said. Although he was looking for a means of getting out of here, Big Three never thought that a chance would present itself in front of him in such a manner. Although Jack had stated that he wanted to deal with his boss, how could Big Three believe that he had the ability? To him, as long as he reached where the other gang members were, he would be saved. And then, he would be able to take his revenge on Jack and the ones that had betrayed them. So, he hurriedly agreed to take Jack to where the leader of the gang was, as if he was afraid that Jack would change his mind after thinking things through. You guys can wait for me here. I'll be back or I'll contact you if I can't come to find you, Jack stated as he exchanged contacts with the guy that had stepped forward first. After that, he drove away with the beaten Big Three. Although Big Three had been well beaten up and had bled, it wasn't that much, other than having a nosebleed that he was preventing by using his handkerchief. With the directions pointed by Big Three, they arrived in front of a villa. Although its level couldn't be compared to the Prince and Princess Palace, it could be said to be good enough. He wasn't surprised by the fact that the gang leader lived an extraordinary life as compared to the low-level goons. In the gang, it was mostly a pyramid. The one at the top was fed by the ones at the bottom. After alighting from the car, Jack and Big Three entered the courtyard of the villa. And just as he had expected, there were a few gang members here, obviously working as security for the boss. When they saw Jack coming in, two of them immediately went ahead and blocked his path. "What business do you have here?" one of the goons asked. "Get the hell out of the way for me," Big Three shouted in response. He was itching to get to his boss so that he could have his sweet revenge. But now, a few minions were delaying that from happening. "Who the F***CK are you? Do you believe me that I'll smash that face of yours?" "Oh, it seems that someone already did that. But it doesn't hurt to beat you more," another goon shouted from the side as he pointed at Big Three. "You idiot. Do you know who you're talking to? I'll destroy you." Big Three was already angry, and now that even a small goon dared to talk to him with such disrespect, he obviously had to do something about the anger in his heart. "Do you know where you are? Better scram from here, BF dash." The goon wasn't allowed to speak further as he was interrupted by the other goon. "Why does his voice sound somehow familiar?" the goon said as he tried sizing up Big Three. Upon being reminded by his colleague, the other goon looked at Big Three and immediately found the similarities between him and their third boss. "Now that you mentioned it, he really does look like him. But hey, could he be his twin brother? Is he here to look for Big Three to ask for revenge? After all, look at his face. It's like someone beat the **T out of him." "I think you're right. He may be his twin brother or something. Or could he be his father or son? Come on, can you stop bullshit**ting? How can you not know Big Three? He doesn't have a wife, in fact. He always hangs out with several girls. How can he have a big son like this? Wait, now that this guy has hurt us and we talk to him rudely, do you think he will report us to Big Three? So what? This is the boss's villa. We didn't know him, and we wanted to send him away when he was rude. Case solved." "You're brilliant." The two guys spoke to each other, completely forgetting that Jack and Big Three were still standing there. Jack chuckled as he looked at Big Three, who was already fuming, and said, "Looks like your prestige as the third boss of the Jerks Brothers gang isn't that high." Jack's words immediately garnered the attention of the two that were still, seriously, discussing on how to deal with the situation in front of them. "What did I just say? I knew that this was Big Three's son," one of the goons said as he looked at his partner smugly. "Get lost. I think I heard him call him third boss," the other one retorted. "Come on. How can Big Three be beaten into such an embarrassing state?" The other one didn't believe it at all. Getting enough of this, Big Three stepped forward and gave each of them a tight slap on their faces. Pa, pa. One by one, the two that hadn't expected this situation immediately looked at Big Three with their wide eyes. They were just about to retort when they heard Big Three talking again. "Just you wait till I finish dealing with the current problem. I'll make sure that you disappear by tonight," Big Three said coldly. "Who's this shouting idiot that has been disfigured?" A man wearing a black short-sleeved shirt that exposed his thick arm muscles chuckled as he looked at Big Three. "What are you laughing at, Big Two?" Frowning, Big Three looked at the guy whom he referred to as Big Two as he asked coldly, "Ah? You're Big Three? What the F asterisk CK happened to you? Did you go to a dojo to challenge their master, and you ended up being beaten to a pulp?" Big Two was greatly surprised. He hadn't expected that Big Three would be reduced to such a state in this city. "You're the one that challenged a master of a dojo," Big Three retorted furiously. After calming down a little bit, he looked at the two that had been talking rubbish since he arrived and said, "I'll come back and deal with you." The two gangsters were immediately frightened as they shivered and took a few steps backwards. Although they wanted to defend themselves, upon seeing Big Three's face, they immediately gave up on that thought. "And who's this?" Big Two asked as he sized up Jack, who was standing at the side while enjoying the little show. "Big Two, we need to see the boss. He's here for the boss." Big Three didn't say more than that. He simply decided that it would be good if they dealt with Jack inside the territory, where there would be no witnesses. Looking at Jack for a moment, Big Two led the way as he said, "Follow me." Jack and Big Three followed Big Two into the villa. Then, they exited the villa through the back door and headed towards a small wooden cabin. Jack wondered what kind of taste the boss of the gang had. He actually lived inside a wooden cabin when he had a villa? Weird. Anyway, he followed the duo to the wooden cabin. Till now, he wasn't afraid that he would get attacked. He had already thought it through. Since the goons had been spread out to block the customers from visiting the stores, it was obvious that there would be lesser gangsters here. When they entered the cabin, Big Two used a crowbar to open up the wooden floor. Beneath it, there was a thick door that once it was opened, there was a path that led towards the underground. Jack was a little surprised upon seeing this. He finally understood why the boss was living in a wooden cabin. It was just a fa ade. But it was to be expected, as they would definitely be having shady deals that couldn't be exposed. And the way that they had hidden the door was definitely in such a way that it couldn't be expected. The metallic door was almost a meter thick, which would definitely prevent someone from noticing that below it there was a hole. Jack said no word as he followed the duo down the well-lit path. And not long after, they arrived in a mansion-like basement. The basement was just like a house, as it was well decorated. Added to this was the fact that it was designed just like how one would a mansion. Not long after, they entered a room where there was a man who was in his early 50s. He was holding a smoking pipe as he smoked without care of the world. The room had a setup that was similar to that of an office. But currently, the man was seating on a couch, and in front of him was a table made of glass. "What's it?" He raised his head as he asked when he noticed the three. But he focused his gaze on Jack. Although he was surprised by Big Three's swollen face, he still ignored that for the moment. "Boss, this dash," before Big Three could say a word. Jack took a few steps forward and looked at the boss as he asked, "Are you the one that ordered your minions to cause my store's losses?" Although surprised by Jack's words, the boss didn't lose his composure and said, "I was paid for that, and that was what I did. But I'm surprised that you're this young." Jack raised his brows a little. A small but cold smile appeared at the corner of his lips as he asked, "And how much did they pay you?" He completely ignored the man's last part of the sentence. Without seeing the need of hiding such a thing, or maybe due to his pride, the boss replied, $20 million in full. "Ha ha," Jack chuckled a little before he spoke again. "Just a small $20 million to cause me a loss of over $100 million. Do you think that's fair? It doesn't matter. To us, it's a simple thing to block the stores and ensure that there are no sales before they close down. So, the $20 million is a good price." The man replied as he placed the smoking pipe on the table in front of him. "Oh, I see. But did you ask the one that gave you the mission about the risk involved when taking the mission?" Jack asked curiously. "You're just a newcomer to the city. What risks can you bring if you're trying to establish yourself here? It's obvious that you have no big background." The man replied as he eyed Jack. Jack nodded. He then said, "May be true that I don't have a family to back me up, but you should have at least asked about my ability before provoking me." The moment that he finished speaking, he kicked the table that was separating the two of them, immediately breaking it into pieces. "May be true that I don't have a family to back me up, but You should have at least asked about my ability before provoking me. The moment he finished speaking, he kicked the table that was separating the two of them, immediately breaking it into pieces. Jack's action startled even the boss, as he had never expected that there was a person that would dare to attack him on his turf. So, he had completely been unprepared for such a situation. Jack strode forward while ignoring the surprised and stunned gazes of the three. He stopped in front of the boss of the Jerk Brothers gang. Or maybe the real Jerk Brother. Whatever, Jack didn't care about the name as he spoke. The first thing that I want from you is that you compensate me for my losses. Jack's voice wasn't loud, but it could be clearly heard by the three present in the room. Jack continued, the total loss for the previous day should be at least $210 million. And today, now is already almost noon and is on a Sunday, it should be at least $90 million. In total, you'll have to compensate me with at least $300 million. Who are you ting? You dare be rude in front of me, the Jerk Brother of Inchoate? It seems that you don't value your life at all. The boss, who had just regained his composure, sprang to his feet as he pointed his finger at Jack and shouted, Tui, $300 million? Do you think I don't know what kind of business you're doing in this city? Not to mention $300 million in 1.5 days. You cannot earn $100 million in a whole month. Jerk Brother continued. Furthermore, do you expect me to compensate you? Heh, you better know where you're right now. This is my territory and I have the say here. I'm the king here. Jerk Brother continued. Jack ignored whatever Jerk Brother had just said as he continued with whatever it was that he was saying. The second thing that I want is the information about the one that sent you to disrupt my business here in the city. If they cannot look for better means and resort to such foul ones, I don't mind playing this game with them either. Upon seeing that Jack had ignored him, Jerk Brother was furious. He looked at Big 3 and Big 2, who were watching from the side, still unable to make out what they were supposed to do, and shouted, What the F***ck are you doing there? Call all the brothers of the gang here. Why yes, boss. Both Big 2 and Big 3 were startled by Jerk Brother's shout and hurriedly nodded their heads before rushing out of the room. Jerk Brother. Although he had said that they were supposed to call the others, he didn't mean that both of them should leave. He had expected that only one of them would leave to call the gangsters that were around while the other one would remain to restrain Jack from taking any action. Looks like those two are so thoughtful and that they knew that we need some time alone. Now that there's no more distraction, let's get serious. Jack smiled as he looked at Jerk Brother, whose expression was dark at the moment. What serious business do we two have to discuss? Just be patient and wait for my little brothers to come and deal with you. Jerk Brother spoke as he sat back on the couch. Sorry for that, but I don't think I have that much time to wait. So, I'll go straight to the point. Are you going to compensate me and provide me with the information that I want or not? Jack shook his head as he placed his foot on the couch that Jerk Brother was seated on. Seeing this, Jerk Brother was obviously infuriated. This was the place that he usually sat when he was relaxing. And now, Jack had just stepped on it with his shoe. He was just about to reprimand him when suddenly, he felt a hand holding his collar. Jack then spoke, more coldly this time. If you won't speak, I might as well force the words out of you. Pa. A resounding slap could be heard in the next second as Jack slapped Jerk Brother. He had put in part of his strength, and as a result, a few teeth of Jerk Brother immediately loosened in his mouth. Had Jack placed a little bit more strength, Jerk Brother would have been forced to either swallow or spit out the teeth. What the F***ck do why dash? Jerk Brother immediately wanted to shout curses at Jack, but he wasn't given a chance at all. Pa, pa, pa. One slap after the other landed on his cheeks, and not long after, they were swollen as if he had just stuffed his mouth with food. Not only that, but during the time that Jack was slapping him, he had already spat several of his teeth. The area closer to his eyes had already become black, with several marks of fingers being visible on his cheeks. I'll speak. Stop. I sheed that I will speak. With a few of his teeth missing and his cheeks swollen from receiving slaps, Jerk Brother spoke as if he was forcing himself to speak a foreign language, but his words were full of his accent. I'll speak. Stop. I said that I will speak. Now that's good. Why the hell did you make me waste a lot of time and effort slapping the words out of you? Jack shook his head helplessly as he released Jerk Brother, who then fell back on the couch. Jerk Brother wanted to cry at this moment. He was a coward who had chanced upon luck. He had won a lottery grand prize of $10 million. From there, he had intended to show off by hiring a few lackeys for himself, and as time passed by, he had hired almost 100 of them. And, using these 100 over men, he had decided to join the underworld. And so, the Jerk Brothers gang was formed. As the years went by, their reputation grew, and at the same time, their power rose and they became one of the top gangs in the city. It has already been 7 years since then, and now, the Jerk Brothers gang had grown to such a large gang in that he could make deals with the top families. He had gained a lot of wealth during these years, the villa above being one of them. But knowing that he didn't have the ability to fight, he had always put on a cold and calm front to give the impression that he was a person that had nothing that could scare him. And for such a reason, added to his brains, he was able to lead the gang to the level that it was at the moment without the underlings revolting. Having gotten used to simply acting tough and solving the problems that required muscles by using his minions, he had never thought of a situation where he would be beaten up to this extent. When the second slap landed on him, he had already decided to tell the truth. But the slaps just kept coming without ceasing. It was only after the rate and speed at which the slaps were coming reduced that he had a chance of speaking. As for the ones that had gone to call the underlings, he wasn't sure if it was just taking time for them to reach here, or if they were just taking their time. Anyway, since they were not here, he would have to make sure that he could get himself out of the situation that he was in. So, let's start with the first thing that I wanted. Will you compensate me or not? Jack smiled as he rubbed his palms together, obviously indicating that if the answer that he received was unsatisfactory, he would rain several slaps on Jerk Brothers' cheeks again. See, can you rejush it? After all, the $300 million is a big amount of money. Jerk Brothers stuttered as he asked, can you reduce it? After all, the $300 million is a big amount of money. Jack looked at him as he stated calmly, you know, I have only asked for the exact amount of money that I have lost so far. I have not added the money that you're supposed to pay for making me spend a lot of time to get here. I have not added the price of dealing with the psychological torture to my employees. I have not added the cost of treating my customers' psychological damage, physical damage, hunger damage, refusal damage, threat damage, shoe dam dash. All right, I'll pay it by next week. Most of the chings that I own in terms of ashich. I'll have to shell them to get enough money for that. That is unless you can take the ashich. Upon seeing how the price was going to rise, Jerk Brother had no choice but to agree. All right, I'll pay it by next week. Most of the things that I own are in terms of assets. I'll have to sell them to get enough money for that. That's unless you can take the assets. I can barely accept the one about you spending time to come here personally. But what's up with this customer damage? It's not like you'll give them the money anyway. Refusal damage? Hunger damage? F***CK. Even shoe damage? Does any of these exist? Jerk Brother wailed inside his mind. That's good then. I'll just take the money. And you better not try running away because I can still find you no matter where you hide. Jack gave a warning before continuing with narrowed eyes. Who's the one that gave you the mission? Jerk Brother felt his body shudder under Jack's gaze. All the same, he collected himself together and replied, I don't know. Shamwan coyed and gave me the mish. On. He transferred the money to my account after we came to an agreement. I don't know. Someone called and gave me the mission. He transferred the money to my account after we came to an agreement. When he saw Jack's eyes still on him, he continued, the details of the number were encrypted show. I didn't see the number of the Shinder. Ash for the account that shint the money. I don't know the owner either. The details of the number were encrypted so I didn't see the number of the sender. As for the account that sent the money, I don't know the owner either. Jack thought for a moment and asked for the phone. After looking at the call logs, he found that the phone didn't show who the caller was, it just showed that it was a private number. After a while, Jack opened the bank message and looked at it. The account was registered under a person surnamed Hazda. The account number was also there. But Jack was sure that there was no family with the surname Hazda in Inchoate City that had the abilities to easily pay $20 million. Now, who was this person? Jack then remembered something. He took out his phone and sent Denali the details that he'd gathered and asked her to investigate it. Now, he just had to wait for the results. About 10 minutes later, Jack received a call from Denali. "Hello, Master. I found who the owner of the account is. The person is called James Hasda. He works for the Dante family under Reuben Shineley. Reuben Shineley is the head butler of the Dante family and is currently serving the current family head, Kevin Dante," Denali began. "According to the records of the conversation, I have hacked into the private message that he had received 2 days ago stating that James Hasda was supposed to hire a group of gangsters to cause trouble for Jackson Enterprise Grocery Department." As Jack listened, his expression darkened. He himself hadn't expected that the family head of the Dante family would target him. As far as he could remember, other than in the banquet that was organized by Celine, he had never met Kevin. Additionally, even during the banquet, he couldn't remember interacting with him. But at the end of it all, he was targeted by the other party. The Dante family had no dealings with the groceries. So, this couldn't be said to be a rivalry in business. But this was now at a personal level, a level that Jack would absolutely not tolerate. "Okay then, try and look into the Dante family. Try and see if you can find anything related to the reason as to why they are targeting me," Jack instructed after a moment of thought. "Yes, Master," Denali replied. After hanging up, Jack looked at Jerk Brother, who was trying to catch what the person at the other end was saying. Upon noticing that the call had ended, he leaned his back on the couch and pretended that he hadn't done anything. Jack had obviously seen his actions, but he decided to ignore them because he had other things to do at the moment, and there was nothing sensitive that they had spoken of. "You can have those goons of yours retreat. I already know that the one that gave you the mission is the head butler of the Dante family," Jack stated. Ignoring Jerk Brother's surprised gaze, he continued, "You better pay up whatever you're supposed to. But if you try playing any tricks again, I surely will make you pay for that." He turned around and headed for the door. He stopped for a moment as if he had just remembered something. He said without looking back, "I've taken a few of your men to be working for me. So, I hope that you won't cause problems for them. Or else, I'll make one for you and I can assure that you won't like it." And with the last word, Jack stepped out of the room. Once he saw Jack walking out of the room, Jerk Brother immediately wiped away the cold sweat that had accumulated on his forehead. It was only at this moment that he realized how tense he really was in front of Jack. Although Jack was just a youth and he himself was already in his early 50s, he was greatly pressured by Jack. The thing that had shocked him the most was that Jack had actually found out who was the one that had sent the money within 10 minutes. This was something that even the big family in Inchoate City couldn't do. What's more, although the Dante family had tried hiding their tracks, just with the account number, Jack had found who the sender was. Didn't that mean that Jack had powerful connections with someone at the bank? Furthermore, he knew who the person was although he wasn't named Dante. Jack actually found out that he was related to the Dante family. "I better try not to provoke him. Otherwise, I will surely be finished," Jerk Brother thought to himself. A huge crowd of people was blocking the hallway about 100 meters from the room that Jack was talking with Jerk Brother. Each and every one of them was holding a weapon, and they seemed to be waiting for someone. In front of the group, Big 2 and Big 3 stood there, each of them gazing towards the entrance not far away from them. This was the scene that Jack saw the moment that he stepped out of the room. He looked at the huge crowd of people that were blocking the corridor with a smile. He didn't stop walking, and neither was he surprised to see them here. With his senses, he had already heard them the moment that they entered the basement. He could already guess that this group was planning on overthrowing Jerk Brother. All that time that Jack had been inside that room, if these guys were really going to help, they would have already done so. They had arrived about 5 minutes after the two left the room. But Jack had been in the room for over 20 minutes, but they hadn't showed up. Although they indeed came in earlier, they had been standing there, waiting. "I guess that you guys are waiting for me to deal with your boss before you can take over the throne of the gang?" Jack asked with a smile on his face as soon as he was in front of the group. The smile made Big 3's heart skip a beat at the moment. It wasn't long since he saw that smile. That was the same smile on his face when he beat up more than 20 people of the group that he had taken to deal with Jack. "What are you talking about? We just arrived here and we're waiting for you so that we can beat you up," Big 3 said. Looking at the big group behind him, he got his courage to face Jack. On the other hand, Jack simply chuckled and said, "Don't worry, it doesn't matter. But if you were expecting me to kill the boss for you before you can attack me in the name of revenge, then I'm sorry to disappoint you. Your boss is still alive and healthy." Jack's words stunned both Big 3 and Big 2. They never thought that Jack could easily see through their plan. But all the same, they decided that they were going to deal with Jack. Jack had already beaten Big 3, and that was enough of a reason for them to attack. Big 3 was just about to order the group to charge forward when they heard a shout coming from behind Jack. "What the F***CK are you doing there? Can you get out of the way and let the gentleman pass?" Jerk Brother yelled. He wanted Jack to get out of here as fast as possible. But the group under him was already trying to make him stay. Jerk Brother's words stunned the group. They hadn't expected that their boss would allow Jack to leave. Although Big 3 was reluctant, he had no choice but to give up on the idea of having his revenge for a moment. They had planned to finish off Jack the moment that they found out that Jerk Brother was dead. According to what Big 3 had thought, Jack was furious and would definitely kill Jerk Brother. And in the name of having revenge for their boss, they would attack Jack. As for why they couldn't just attack Jerk Brother and take the throne from him was simple. If they dared to betray the leader of a gang, all the other gangs will definitely eliminate them. But now that the plan was no longer going to work, they had to look for ways to deal with the furious Jerk Brother. The crowd parted and Jack walked out. He got out through the wooden cabin and finally left the villa as he headed towards Celine's friend's company, Eminent Beauty. As for how Jerk Brother was going to deal with the two people who tried betraying him, he didn't care as it was none of his business. Along the way, he called the guy that was leading the gangsters that he'd left at Dizza warehouse and told him that they were supposed to look for him at the entrance of the business Overlord building the following day. And after that, he called George. Not long after, George responded, "Hello, boss. Are you okay?" George's voice was filled with concern. Jack had left to deal with a group of gangsters, and as a result, he was concerned. He now took Jack not only as his boss, but as a friend. So, he was really concerned about his safety.
"Yeah, I'm okay."
"How are things on your side?" Jack replied before asking. "It's good that you're okay. As for this side, the gangsters are retreating. There are areas that they had retreated from earlier," George replied. Jack nodded in satisfaction. Although the gangsters might have caused him to lose some customers, he was sure that they would be back in a while. "I have something to tell you. It seems that your family is involved with the gangsters," Jack said solemnly. "Ah? Are you sure about that, boss? If it's my Uncle Frank, then he's definitely doing this on his own, but not the family." George tried to reason things out. "I guess you know Reuben Shinily?" Jack asked. "Our family's butler?" George was surprised that Jack knew about the old butler. "Yes, he's the one that paid the gangsters to cause me to close the stores," Jack said. "This can't be." "Wait, I'll ask them about this," George said before ending the call. He absolutely knew that this involved the Dante family. Then that meant that his family wanted to fight with Jack. But what he didn't know was why that was so. Dante family mansion. Inside the study, Kevin looked at Reuben and asked, "How are things going with the plan?" "They're good. Yesterday, they had a drop of sales by about 90%, Reuben replied. "Okay then, I would like you to organize a meeting with Jack. If possible, I would like that to happen tonight. We can invite him to dinner and discuss things through," Kevin said. "Okay," Reuben replied before taking his phone, ready to make a call. But before he could, the phone rang. Looking at the unfamiliar number, he frowned for a moment before he received it. "Hello? Are you Mr. Reuben of the Dante family?" "Okay," Reuben replied before taking his phone, ready to make a call. But before he could, the phone rang. Looking at the unfamiliar number, he frowned for a moment before he received it. "Hello? Are you Mr. Reuben of the Dante family?" Reuben wondered why the voice sounded familiar in his ears. But all the same, just to confirm his suspicions, he asked, "Who are you? Of course you won't know me because you were hiding in the dark, trying to play mysterious while sending my Jerk Brothers gang into our doom. How good you really are, Mr. Reuben," Jerk Brother said sarcastically. Reuben hadn't expected that Jerk Brother would know that they were the ones that had offered the mission. But what surprised him the most was the fact that Jerk Brother said that he had sent them to their doom. How? He couldn't understand. "What do you mean by saying that we sent you to your doom? Wasn't it just dealing with a simple junior and giving him pressure that his stores would be closed down? Reuben asked, completely ignoring the first part of Jerk Brothers' statement. Just a junior? Are you trying to play ignorant with me at this time, even after I have found out that you were the ones that had given out the mission? I will tell you this right now, we are no longer taking that mission. I will refund you your $20 million. Jerk Brother got even angrier as he thought how the other party was playing dumb. It was obvious that he knew what he had done, but he was actually trying to get out of this by playing dumb. Although there was nothing big that he could do to the Dante family, he could as well stop cooperating with them in the future. He might as well tell the other bosses of the gangs in the city about this. So, he could make sure that all the connections that the Dante family had in the underworld were cut off. What do you mean that you're refunding me? I simply told you to pressure the stores by reducing their sales, that's all. It's not like you're going to a life and death fight, right? Reuben asked. He couldn't allow one of their plans to fail at a critical moment. After all, they had already arrived at a crucial point, and it was just that they simply had to take a single action and they would succeed. This is more than a life and death battle. At least in a life and death battle, there's a chance of getting out alive, even if it's small. But this is a direct death sentence. Jerk Brother retorted. Can you be direct with your words? You're talking in riddles that I definitely can't understand, Reuben asked as he tried to understand what Jerk Brother was meaning. On the other hand, Kevin listened tentatively from the side. He wasn't sure about what was going on, but from Reuben's expression, he could tell that it wasn't something good. And for some reason, a bad premonition began rising in his heart. What I mean is simple. You actually knew that the owner of the stores was actually a big shot, but you hid that information from us. What's more, you sent us saying that he was just a nobody with a little money trying to establish himself in the city. It would have been better if you had not said anything. But you dare give us faulty information? The more Jerk Brother spoke, the angrier he became. When he had received the information that Jack was just a little junior with money, trying to establish himself in the city, he thought that the information was to be trusted considering that the other party was paying $20 million. Who knew that they were trying to eliminate the gang using the $20 million? How could he not be angry? Had they not told him any information about Jack, he would have definitely investigated him. And if he found that he was someone that he couldn't handle, he would simply refuse to take the mission. What big shot! That little brat has got no background at all. He's trying to establish himself here in the city. Reuben refused to believe that Jack had a bigger background than the Dante family. You still can't admit it? Heh, you asked someone else to send me the money and make the deal with me. But at the end of the day, I still found out that you were the ones that had wanted us to carry out the mission, Jerk Brother sneered. Upon being reminded that the other party had actually found out that they were the ones that had asked James to give out the mission to the gang, Reuben couldn't help but think things through. According to what he knew, unless James himself revealed that he was the one that had told him to ask the Jerk Brothers gang to carry out the mission, there was no way that Jerk Brother would know about that. Not even the big five families could know about that, as James was someone who secretly operated things for the Dante family. He had never revealed information that he was related to the Dante family in any way. Are you too surprised? Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. I would like to tell you that it wasn't me who found out who James was. You know who did it? It was the target of the mission. Jerk Brother laughed angrily as he said these words. Reuben couldn't believe it at all. Jack? You mean that he was the one that had found out about it? Did you tell him about the mission? What nonsense are you spouting there? Humph. This guy is so strong. With most of my men out there to block the stores, there were only a few of them present at my villa. One of my subordinates took 100 men to deal with him. Jerk Brother was silent for a moment before he continued. And you know what the results were? He beat up more than 20 people by himself and then he bought the others over. In other words, I have lost over 100 men because of you. Then, he came to my villa and caused trouble. He took my phone and looked at the account number that had sent the money to my account. And guess what? You were exposed within 10 minutes. 10F** King minutes. Not days, not months, it was 10 minutes. Even an idiot could understand what this means. Someone without any connections can do that? F***CK. I'm sure that even you yourself don't have enough connections with the bank for them to give you the information about the account holder. And another thing that you should know is that he knew that you were the one that actually sent the guy. So, he knows. And guess what? I've changed my mind. I'm not refunding your 20 million that you sent over. After all, I have just lost 300 million as compensation plus 100 min over. Jerk Brother said all these words in one breath before hanging up. Ruben remained holding the phone in his hand, not sure what to do at the moment. He was too shocked by the information that he had just received. He wasn't sure what was the best way of reacting to this piece of information. Kevin watched from the side in silence as he waited for Ruben to speak. In the end, seeing that the old man was still standing there without saying a word, he couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" Kevin's words pulled Ruben out of his stupor. He regained his usual calmness, but there was somberness in his expression. He began explaining, "The Jerk Brothers failed the mission that we gave them." When Ruben finished explaining what had happened, Kevin himself was also not sure what to say at the moment. He had now become frustrated. He wondered why all of his plans were getting ruined every time that they reached a critical moment. Could we have been mistaken about Jack's background? Kevin asked doubtfully. I think so. But I think even our previous assumptions are wrong. He might be from a bigger family, one that is bigger than the Alfonso family. I do believe that even the Alfonso family would need a lot more time to be able to find out that James was related to us. It may take a whole month, or they may even fail to know about that. The more Ruben spoke, the more frightened he became. Then, Kevin thought of something that made him jump from the couch. Could he be the Jack that Dalton asked me to help him get information about him? Upon being reminded of this, Ruben also remembered that it hadn't been long since Dalton, who was Jack's father, had called and asked them to help him gather information about his son. According to what he had said, his son was about to get married to Alton's granddaughter, and they were already engaged. If they did give them the help, the Alfonso family would support them. Thinking about Jack being known as Jackson Alfonso, and for him to know about their information in 10 minutes, could it be that Alton was involved? I don't think that Master Alton can do that in such a short moment of time. Although he's as powerful as the Gravies, his influence in Inchoate City is minimal. Kevin shook his head as he muttered. Then, could it be Dash? Just before Ruben could say a word more, Kevin's phone rang. Kevin took it and looked at the screen. His expression changed, and he became angry. The caller was his son, George, who had insisted on living outside for 5 years. Receiving the call, he asked grumpily, "What is it?" "Father, what are you guys doing? Do you know who you're actually provoking? I will tell you that, if you have any more plans of messing with Jack, it's better if you give up on them right now," George said.